Let's talk about real estate. And today we're doing a part 2 to a video that I did a while back that did very well. So thank you guys for that. Where you guys asked me in the comments to go ahead and do the part 2, since in that video I shared with you that there were several more property types that I wanted to include, but I just didn't want to make the video super long. So today I'm going to go through the rest of that list that I had originally created and share those additional property types with you that you should never buy or be very careful if you do buy them. So without wasting any time, let's jump right back into the list. So the first one is properties in a high natural hazard risk zone. And this could be properties that are in severe to very severe fire zones, properties that are in floodplains or flood areas, properties that have landslides or a lot of land movement, and so on. Now, when you buy a home, you actually get a report that the seller generally has to provide called a Natural Hazard Disclosure Report, or for short, an NHD report. And this report will tell you all of the major hazards that affect various properties and what level of risk the subject property or the property that you're looking to buy has in terms of the spectrum of risk. And you'll want to pay very close attention to this report and make sure that the property you're buying isn't in one of these high risk zones related to any of these types of property hazards. And if it is, you may want to think twice about buying a property like this or be very careful and understand the implications and the risks. For instance, insurance can be very costly or downright impossible to get on these types of properties. And even if you can get insurance today to cover that risk, there's no telling what might happen tomorrow, in that the insurance company could decide to pull that policy or not renew that policy. And that has become a real problem here in Southern California because of the wildfires. A lot of insurers have pulled out of California completely, and you can no longer get fire coverage, or in some cases, any insurance at all for properties that are in these high fire risk zones. So for that reason, pay special attention to the NHD report and make sure your property doesn't fall into one of these natural hazard areas so you can protect yourself and your investment. The next type of home you want to avoid or be very careful if you do purchase are homes that have unpermitted garage conversions or unpermitted additions. Now, this is very common in the city of Los Angeles or in a lot of areas here in Southern California where the homes are a lot older. You often see people that have done garage conversions, or maybe they did an unpermitted addition to the property at some point in the past. And the reason why this is pretty common in certain areas like the city of Los Angeles is because a lot of the homes there are 100 years old, and way back in the day, you just didn't have the same infrastructure, the same city development and planning departments that you have today. So a lot of people just kind of did whatever they want, and it was never really a big deal. But these can come back to bite you in a big way if the city ever finds out about these unpermitted additions or modifications to the property, or if you're trying to sell the property in a soft market like we've been experiencing lately, where buyers are a lot more discerning and they're able to call these things out and make a big deal out of them, where a few years ago they would have been happy to have the additional unpermitted space and bought the property anyways. And in some circumstances, the city inspector could actually come in and make you completely tear down an addition or all the work that you've done on a garage conversion. So these can turn into a huge hassle if you're not careful. Now, I personally wouldn't worry about smaller things that weren't permitted, like small electrical stuff or small plumbing stuff or whatever. Those really aren't that big of a deal if you ever had to deal with getting them permitted after the fact. But something like these two big ones, garage conversions or unpermitted additions, these are big deal items, and you probably should be concerned if you're buying a house like this. If you know what you're doing and these things don't concern you, that's one thing. But if you don't know what you're doing, and you would be concerned if all of a sudden you had a huge unexpected expense because of a city inspector coming out, then be very careful of these types of properties. And real quick, if you need help with any real estate needs here in SoCal, reach out to me. My contact info is down below. The next one to consider is buying the most expensive home or homes at the top of the price range in a less expensive market. This can come back to bite you if we're in a soft market like we are today. these properties can be extremely difficult to sell and very hard to recover top dollar for if you have to turn around and sell the property at some point in the future. It's also usually very hard to comp these properties out because there's not a lot of comparables in that area, and the cost per square foot can start dropping very quickly for properties that are way more square feet than what is typical for the neighborhood that the property sits in. As they always say, it's better to buy the ugliest home at the cheapest price in the nicest neighborhood, because this gives you a ton of room to make improvements and substantially increase the value of the property. Whereas if you do the opposite and buy the nicest, biggest house in a so-so neighborhood at the highest price, you could find yourself ultimately losing a lot of money in the future. The final one for today are homes that have hidden legal or zoning issues. As an example, you may be thinking you might want to do a short-term rental out of your property at some point in the future. Well, this is the kind of thing where you want to make sure you understand the local zoning rules and the rules around short-term rentals before you make a decision to purchase that property, because you could be in for a big surprise. And also, the laws around things like short-term rentals have been changing, and in some places they're proposing retracting rights that they had already granted, allowing people to have short-term rentals in those areas. Additionally, maybe you are hoping to have a single-family home in a very quiet neighborhood with low density. Well, laws have been changing recently, allowing much greater density with far less parking. So what may seem like a quiet single-family neighborhood today with a lot of parking on the streets could turn into a very busy, dense neighborhood with no parking on the streets in the future. So if you're seeking a property that has more privacy, lower density, quiet streets with a lot of parking, you may want to buy a property that has a much bigger lot where there's no neighbors around you, and the lots next to you maybe can't be built on, or they're owned by the city, or they're too sloped to build, etc. All right. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let me know in the comments down below if I missed any important ones either in my previous video or this video, and maybe I'll cover that in the future. I want to thank you guys very much for watching the previous video and this one. Take care.